Welcome to the National Gallery. My name is Anne Robbins. I'm Associate Curator of Post-1800 Paintings here at the Gallery. And for this afternoon's 10-minute talk, I'm going to focus on this painting by French artist Edouard Manet, The Execution of Maximilian. So why did we choose this canvas this afternoon? Because you will agree with me on the fact that it is particularly arresting. It is a particularly striking work. It is arresting on account of the subject it depicts. It's a particularly violent scene. It's also arresting because of the particular appearance of the canvas, which, as you can see, is made of fragments which have been reunited on a single large canvas. And of course, it is also striking because of its scale, which is unusually large for a painting by Manet. You see it's even larger than the Eva González, the portrait of Eva González by Manet, which is one of the National Gallery's 4 paintings by Manet. And interestingly, all 4 Manets kept in the National Gallery's collection were all acquired between 1917 and 1923, so all acquired by the gallery within a period of 6 years. So in 1867, when Manet starts working on this canvas, he's already a well-established artist. His reputation is very much a controversial one. He had, by that point in his career, already shocked and scandalized the French public with paintings which were controversial. Paintings like the Luncheon on the Grass, Le Déjeuner sur l'herbe, now kept in the Musée d'Orsay, which was based on Old Master sources and yet highly transgressive because it showed a young naked woman staring at you, likewise with his Olympia showing a naked prostitute in a Paris brothel in 1865. And here, this painting is no exception. It is equally shocking, and the reason for this is that it depicts what was at the time an extremely contemporary event. And to get the full grasp of what is happening here on this painting, you need a bit of historical context. So what we are looking at here is the execution of Maximilian. And Maximilian of Mexico was a puppet emperor. He was an Austrian archduke that the French emperor Napoleon III had placed on the throne of Mexico as part of his imperialistic policy to gain control, to impose French control over Mexico in 1864. So Maximilian arrived in Mexico, on the throne of Mexico, in 1864 with the support of the French army. But then what happened is that the situation soon deteriorated, leading to a civil war with the a very strong Republican army led by the leader was called Benito Juarez. When the power of Emperor Maximilian of Mexico became very much endangered, Napoleon III withdrew his troops, which means that the emperor was imprisoned, he was trialed and then executed. And this is the moment we see here on the 19th of June, 1867. So this is the moment of the execution itself, which we know happened north of Mexico City. And you see the hand of Emperor Maximilian just visible. The part of the painting depicting the actual emperor has been destroyed, and I'll come back to this later. So all you see here is Maximilian's hand. He's standing next to his faithful General Miramon, who was also shot that morning. And then Manet has focused on the firing squad itself. So you see 6 soldiers who are actually shooting at the 3 men because Maximilian was flanked with another General Meira. Just at the back of the firing squad, you can just see this patch of red. This is the kepi of the officer given the order to shoot, and you can see that the order of shooting is given by the raised sword. And then just to the right is this sergeant who is actually checking the mechanics of his rifle because he is about to give the coup de grâce. And the coup de grâce was given when the execution hadn't quite worked and and it had to be it had to be finished, as it were, with a final shot. So why did Manet paint such a scene? And indeed, it's a subject which came to preoccupy him greatly because he painted 3 versions of this painting on that scale. There are 2 other large canvases showing this exact same scene. One is in Boston and is acknowledged as being the first in the sequence. The second is the painting now in the National Gallery. Then Manet reworked the composition and worked from a sketch, so a smaller format work, which is now in Copenhagen. And finally, what we reckon is the final painting is in the Kunsthalle in Mannheim. So a whole sequence of a whole series of works on which he spent a long time and which was very much the focus of his attention in 1867 and 68. So why did Manet tackle this subject? First and foremost, because he was himself strongly Republican and as such opposed to the policies of Napoleon III. Also because, for the very fact that the news of the execution of Maximilian which happened on the 19th of June, started to reach France on the 1st of July, and it caused a great scandal. You know, the fact that the French emperor would not have confirmed his support to the Austrian emperor he had himself placed on the throne of Mexico was in itself completely scandalous. Manet worked from newspapers' report. He kept himself very much abreast of what was happening, was reading the paper regularly, and as the news were reaching France of what had actually happened on that morning of the execution, he reworked his composition to make it as close as possible to what had happened to the course of events itself. And I think hence the 3 versions. And for instance, if you look up the painting now in Boston, you can tell that Manet didn't have many visual sources at his disposal, so it is more imaginative. He has given the soldiers some traditional Mexican outfits and sombrero hats, and it is only from August 1867 when the first reports are published that these soldiers were actually wearing military outfits, uniforms, which are very close to that of the French army, that he gave them this more European-looking uniforms. Manet, in the first place, based his composition on a painting he very much admired, he had seen in Spain in 1865, which was Goya's 3 de Mayo 1808, so the 3rd of May 1808, which was in itself a highly politically charged painting with a similar execution scene, with this very same device of the firing squad turning its back to you, and this is a visual trick, you know, by placing the soldiers in such a way, Manet involves us in the scene. You know, he's placing us viewers in the same position as the soldiers, so we are, as such, taking part in this execution scene. Also, just on the composition itself, you see that Manet is cleverly exploiting the contrast between the horizontal lines of the rifles and the strong verticals of the soldiers themselves. So you have this grid-like structure dominating the composition. Then in terms of treatment, these somber tones are typical of Manet's palette, and this kind of slapdash manner also is, and you can almost see that Manet's handling almost matches his subject matter, you know, with these quite dark and somber colors. So with regard to the impact of the painting, it very much cemented Manet's reputation as a controversial artist because it was a highly subversive painting, so much so that Manet never managed to exhibit it at the Salon. It was the subject of very strong censorship, and the lithograph, which was made after the painting, was never allowed to be circulated at the time, because of the resonance of this political event very much had the potential to shatter the prestige of France internationally and to damage the reputation of the French emperor. As a result, the painting remained in Manet's studio. It was not exhibited. It was never bought by any collector in Manet's lifetime. And in Manet's studio, it started to deteriorate. And we know that even at the time of Manet's death, a large part of its left side had been damaged and was cut away. And then after Manet's death in 1883, his family cut several fragments into the paintings in view of selling them separately. And it is only in the 1890s, i.e. about 10 years after Manet's death, that these several remaining fragments were brought together by no less than Edgar Degas. And Degas, of course, had been a great friend of Manet's. The two men were very close to each other, and after Manet's death and later in the 1890s, Degas started to form a very important collection of paintings. And he really went to great lengths to find these fragments in various collections and going to dealers to try and find the fragments of the execution of Maximilian. And Degas was the first one to reassemble them on a single canvas. Then when Degas died in 1917, his collection was put up for sale in Paris the following year, and this is where the National Gallery bought these fragments. And they were again separated, so for several decades, these 4 fragments were shown separately, and it is only in the 1970s that here in our conservation studios, we remounted them on a single canvas. So for all these reasons, it is a very special painting in the National Gallery collection because I think it bears very visible the traces of its subsequent history. This kind of jigsaw puzzle appearance is quite arresting. But it is also, and it is also moving to know that we owe the survival of these paintings to the efforts of a great artist like Edgar Degas. But I think mostly this is a highly original work because it is very much at the crossroads between history painting and political reportage, almost journalism. This particularly strong political comment on the regime of the time. So I think it has retained its great immediacy and its power to shock, and that's why it's still relevant to our public today. So thank you very much.